Your Excellency, Sathasivam, Governor, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the government of India as well as the Observer Research Foundation for taking a leadership role in the ocean agenda. More than 2/3 of the coral reefs in Australia, and especially the Great Barrier Reef, is experiencing shocking amounts of bleaching. And of course, we all know it's coming from rising of the temperature and climate change. In a world of plenty, 1 in 9 people lack adequate food and nutrition to lead healthy and productive lives. Current patterns of consumption and production increase pressure on already scarce resources. We are overeating our oceans and planet in an incredible way. Healthy seas and oceans are key to rising our challenges today. We need to build a more sustainable relationship with our oceans. And of course we know oceans cover 70% of Earth, but yet provides less than 2% of our food. Oceans therefore offer a huge potential still to be unlocked, but only if we do it in a sustainable way. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot has happened the last couple of years. Oceans are now an integral part of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs, and are also embedded in the climate change agenda, especially, of course, through the Paris Agreement. But this will not be enough. If we don't scale up our efforts in restoring our oceans, there will be no fish left by 2030. Our main focus of the dialogue should be, how do we turn the tide? We need more joint action. We need innovations. We need decisive entrepreneurship. And we need, of course, to waste less. Business as usual is not an option anymore. We have done our planning. We have set our agenda and we have set our actions. Now it's time to act. We have to turn our dialogue into actions. For that, of course, we need governments, but certainly the private sector and NGOs are needed as well. And here we need a paradigm shift. The private sector, NGOs and local communities should be put in the forefront of our development. Governance should have a more facilitative role. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, investments in implementation at global, regional, national and local scale are crucial. We need to invest in social economic growth and social equity. That's why we need, for example, to invest in small-scale fishery communities. They play a fundamental role in balancing growth and conservation. The small-scale sector needs stronger recognition, especially for their role in livelihoods, blue growth and food security. We need to invest in alternatives in order to relieve our oceans. Therefore, we have to invest in aquaculture. Aquaculture has an enormous potential for the delivery of sufficient animal protein in the future, but under one condition, only if we do it in a sustainable way. Of course, we need to protect our biodiversity of our oceans. For that, we need to invest in marine protected areas. Their multifunctional role for food, coastal protection and biodiversity is crucial for supporting livelihoods and jobs of our communities. We need also to invest in new technologies in possibilities to fight illegal fisheries. And think about the potential role of drones in enforcing our laws. And we need more and new partnerships with crucial stakeholders. For that reason, Grenada, the Netherlands and FAO launched a voluntary global network for action on blue growth and food security in Grenada last year. This network has, for example, developed a blue growth initiative working with 9 African countries and the African Development Bank to develop proposals for the Green Climate Fund. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we need not only more actions. Moreover, we need innovations. That's why Retd and the Netherlands launched in May of this year a Global Blue Growth Innovation Institute to ensure greater dissemination of innovative ideas and technologies both to the public but also to the private sector. And we are now working with Mauritius, Vietnam and South Korea to establish 2 other institutes for Africa and Asia. And we need also decisive entrepreneurship. Also for the private sector, business as usual is no option anymore. Major fish stocks can be rebuilt, practices can be enhanced, and traceability and strong supply chain management can contribute to improving working conditions, livelihoods, and food security. Seafood companies have a unique and significant role in enabling the transition to a more sustainable food production system. Until now, companies are reluctant to be open and transparent about their policies, about the practices, and making it difficult to access their contribution to sustainable fisheries. By comparing companies to one another, you can provide transparency and gives credit to companies that show performance which it holds to its account. And with that we can involve the consumers. 2 weeks ago, a Dutch international NGO launched a new initiative which has provided now this tool, the Seafood Stewardship Index. Let's join this initiative. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to make this happen and to make these investments happen, we need a blue economy development framework. The basis premise is that a framework approach is required to ensure that marine and coastal developments that enhances economic growth readily considers a trajectory that is environmentally sustainable, socially inclusive and equitable. Not only is this approach required in a sector-specific circumstances, such as fisheries or tourism, but also in terms of that many interactions and trade-offs between sectors and investments can be clearly defined and articulated. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, only joint efforts can turn the tide for the oceans. To do so, we need to interlink the different international networks. That's why this ocean dialogue comes at a crucial moment. With our dialogue, the coming days, we can not only link our ocean networks, but we can turn them into action. To close with the words of Jacques-Yves Cousteau, it takes generosity to discover the whole truth of others. If you realize you're only a violin, you can open yourself up to the world by playing your role in a concert. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Governor Shri Justice Sathasivam, Honorable Governor of Kerala, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends. It is a great pleasure for me to address you at the opening session of what I am convinced will be an exciting conference on ocean governance. We are particularly pleased to co-organize this session with the Observe Research Foundation, a partner we have been working with for almost 10 years on issues like sustainability and economic development. Last year, in the margins of a conference in The Hague about ocean governance, the idea was born to organize a next conference about the many dimensions of this issue and linking it to one specific region, the Indian Ocean. And here we are in the beautiful state of Kerala, in the presence of experts from many disciplines and from many countries, ready to start our discussion on a common prosperity framework. As it was mentioned in the conference note, an exciting perspective. So why is the issue of oceans so important? Why is there a need to define a common prosperity framework? Well, there are many reasons. First, the oceans form an essential part of the ecosystem called Earth. The oceans produce more than half of the oxygen we need to stay alive. 80% of life on this planet is located in the oceans. The oceans also perform an essential function as cleansing mechanism by restoring polluted water discharged by rivers or by absorbing 30% of the CO2 we emit, which is also called the carbon sink function. But they have other important functions as well. Think about the oceans as a source of nutrition, as Hans Hoogeveen also mentioned, with 3 billion people having the oceans as their primary source of protein. Fish will be an essential part of the solution for the challenge of feeding more than 9 billion people in 2050. Oceans are also an important trade facilitator. And as a trading nation, the Netherlands is very much aware of the importance of the marine trading channels, with 70% of our imports and 35% of our exports using oceans and seas to travel. And I'm convinced that similar figures actually apply for Kerala. And then, of course, we have the oceans as source of tourism. We have the oceans as source of natural resources. And again, there are many other reasons why oceans are a vital part of the ecosystem. So in view of this, have we been taking good care of the oceans? Well, unfortunately, and I'm sure you're aware of that, it is very hard to argue that we did. Our oceans are in a relatively bad shape. The acid levels of the oceans have gone up 30% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And together with the warming of the oceans, that has a negative impact on the carbon sink function of the oceans. And this acidification has also a negative influence on coral. And the bleaching of the corals means less tourism in this Indian Ocean, but for example, also in the Caribbean, where part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands is located. So impacting negatively on the tourism potential of these Dutch islands. The pollution of the oceans, with the plastic soup as a very visible indicator, is reaching alarming levels. Illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing is depleting fish stocks, and the shipping sector is an important contributor to the global CO2 emissions. And the lack of a satisfactory governance structure also leads to geopolitical tensions. And again, this part of the world is very aware of this. And to complete the list, the oceans are also being used for smuggling purposes and are witnessing piracy practices. So, didn't we act as an international community to counter these negative trends? Did we sit on our hands while witnessing these threatening developments? No, definitely not. We certainly did agree on a number of mitigation and adaptation measures. Let me first, of course, mention the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. Not perfect, but a solid basis to build upon in our efforts to improve the governance of oceans. And then, of course, we have the 2 milestone agreements reached recently. First, the Sustainable Development Goal, and of course, especially SDG 14, telling us to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. And secondly, the Paris Agreement, that should lead to levels of CO2 emissions that will keep the rise in temperature, hopefully, well below 2 degrees. So UNCLOS, SDG 14, and Paris give us a general framework to work with. But there are many other initiatives focusing on oceans. There are regional ones, for example. In the North Atlantic region, we have OSPAR, but there are many more regional sea conventions. There are regional fisheries management organizations. There are regional security arrangements. And there is a recent decision, which was quite remarkable, to create a protected area of 1.5 million square kilometers in the Antarctic. There are also global agreements covering a specific sector or agreements focusing on a particular issue. For example, in the framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity, we have agreed to give 10% of the ocean some form of protection by 2020. In UNEP, we have set up a global partnership for marine litter. And in the framework of the UN Fish Stock Agreement, we are developing a maximum sustainable yield concept to be agreed by 2020. In the International Maritime Organization, we agreed to increase the energy efficiency of ships by 30% in 2025. And we are discussing possibilities to limit the use of heavy fuel oil, especially in the Arctic. So there are also quite some initiatives and decisions already taken. As Netherlands, we are participating actively in all these efforts. We are also working on oceans on a bilateral level. For example, with Kenya and Tanzania in the development of a master fisheries plan, or with Bangladesh in developing a sustainable shrimp farming sector while maintaining the mangroves. We also have a number of universities and knowledge institutions working on oceans, for example, on ways to make deep-sea mining more sustainable. And is this all enough? No. It is a good beginning. We are making headway, but definitely we should really be increasing our efforts in order to counter the negative trends. The glass is not half full, but half empty, and we need to fill it in view of the crucial importance of oceans for the well-being of our planet. The follow-up and implementation process of the SDGs and of Paris will allow us to work on this. And let me also mention the UN Conference on Oceans to be held in New York in June, the first ever conference on oceans in UN framework, where the specific problems of small island developing states will get special attention. Many challenges can only be addressed at regional level. It is at regional level that the many and varied geopolitical, economic, security and sustainability-related dimension of our oceans can best be addressed. And coming back to us here in Trivandrum, if you look at the map, you will see that Kerala is very centrally located in the Indian Ocean region. And I understand that already the Romans were aware of the key importance of Kerala for their global trade routes. So it seems to me that in view of the inspiring surrounding we are meeting in, and because of the presence of you, so many distinguished experts, this conference provides us with an excellent opportunity to make progress on a better global and regional governance system for oceans. So let me thank again, in conclusion, the Observer Research Foundation for giving us the possibility to team up in the organization of this conference. And thank you, Honorable Governor of Kerala, for hosting us and attending the opening session of this conference. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kees Rade, Netherlands Ambassador for Sustainable Security. Mr. Hans Hoogeveen, Netherlands Ambassador to United Nations. Shri Abhijit Singh, Senior Fellow, Observer Research Foundation. Mr. Rakesh Shut, Ambassador, Distinguished Fellow, Observer Research Foundation. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all. I am very happy to inaugurate the Oceans Dialogue 2017, organized by the Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi, in association with the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India and the Government of Netherlands. Let me begin by complimenting the Observer Research Foundation for organizing this conference, which is a sincere attempt to evaluate the current international system of ocean governance and to initiate meaningful discussions on maritime policies. Since the nautical domain is becoming increasingly critical for national development, such discussions have great relevance. India's status and heritage as a maritime nation has been established over a history of 5,000 years. The world's first tidal dock is believed to have been built during our Harappan civilization. And we have a historical evidence to prove that Indian ships traded with countries like Java and Sumatra and with other countries in the Pacific and Indian Ocean. We also have a scholarly evidence to prove that navigation activities over the Indian Ocean predates Western civilization. Kerala, too, has rich maritime heritage that included the seaport at the ancient city of Muziris on the Malabar coast. It was the sea route that brought the colonial powers to Kerala, and even now the stories of battles fought by our valiant people against Portuguese navy continue as inspiring legends. The rulers of Calicut in the 16th century had also organized one of the best fleets of those days. While mentioning Kerala's maritime tradition, we cannot forget the Muziris Heritage Project, which also has a spice route initiative to explore the global linkages that the Malabar coast had with many parts of the world. We hope that this spice route initiative will help Kerala and India to emerge again as a major center of international trade and transport. It is estimated that the oceans generate goods and service worth almost 2.5 trillion US dollars per year, which is equivalent to the 7th largest economy in the world. Oceans also provide livelihood to millions of people. In India, the fisheries sector gives nutritional security to the food basket and engages 14 million people in various activities. Therefore, the management of oceans and ocean resources deserves our keen attention. As we all know, the Indian Ocean region faces different complex maritime threats. In spite of significant growth in trade and economic development, the governments in this region are troubled by interstate disputes, piracy, terrorism, drugs and human trafficking, and climate change. This reality calls for ensuring effective maritime governance for security and development. It is gratifying to note that the Indian Ocean states are now giving importance to governance issues and the need to harness the economic potential of the maritime commons. They are now developing coastal infrastructure and connectivity and trying to maintain oceanic biodiversity. Today, we are witnessing a rise in India's maritime consciousness as well as country's efforts to renew its maritime development. This is evident from the range of maritime projects taken by the central government in recent years, especially Sagarmala project, which seeks to modernize our ports, and the project MOUSM that tries to forge new avenues of cooperation and exchange across nations of the Indian Ocean. Moreover, our emphasis on the blue economy agenda, which integrates ocean economy with the principles of social inclusion, environmental sustainability, and innovative business models, deserves special mention. The blue economy model of growth is based on fisheries, renewable energy, infrastructure, industry, and tourism. For this, it is important to ensure that the sea and ocean resources are utilized effectively for the benefit of coastal communities and the general populace. The success of maritime governance will depend upon how effectively regional states develop a working consensus around key developmental objectivities. The attempt must be to evolve a coherent plan of action to address the Indian Ocean's non-traditional and human security challenges and to develop a model of sustainable development that would improve the lives of ordinary people who depend on marine resources for a living. Stopping for a moment, as a person hailing from the neighboring state, Tamil Nadu, you might have come across or you might have read it in newspaper. The southern part of Tamil Nadu, it is closer to Sri Lanka. The fishermen has, every day they are suffering. They have apprehension of the Sri Lankan Navy men. When I had an opportunity to meet the Southern Naval Command Chief as a head of the state, they come and meet me, they come and interact, and I had the opportunity to address naval cadets here. I posed this question. As a common man, I know the answer, but unfortunately our persons concerned and the government are not informing the correct position to the suffering fishermen. A common fisherman or common man asking a question, is it so difficult for an Indian Navy either to prevent our fishermen, the Tamil Nadu fishermen, going beyond our territorial water? Whether Indian Navy cannot confront or challenge the Sri Lankan Navy. Sri Lanka is similar to Kerala, a small country. India is the biggest, more than 10 times. See, common man, as a common man, not, I know the answer, that's why I said, common fishermen asking, why so much of Navy personnel for us? Recently, last week, INS Chennai with modern electrical equipments, electronic warship, but we are not able to prevent the Sri Lankan Navy taking our fishermen to their country every week, because I, as a person coming from Tamil Nadu, I am hearing minimum 15 to 20% were taken to their country, and for this, lot of negotiation at the external levels from Delhi to Colombo, etc. And after negotiation, after 1 month keeping them in jail, they will be sent to India. But still boats are lying there. That is the grievance of a common fisherman. Though I know the answer why this kind of things are happening, but our appropriate authority, the Navy personnel or the fishing department, must apprise our fishermen. What are all the, now we have all modern facility. When the Sri Lankan Navy ship is able to safeguard their boundary, what is the difficulty for our Indian Navy to either warn our fishermen not to cross Indian territorial water or help them to go and catch them? That is the problem being faced by the fisherman community in southern part of Tamil Nadu. Because I come from that state, I know their feelings. So I thought you are going to discuss various issues about ocean and sea related matters. This can also be considered. Only for that I mentioned. Besides, the significance of such measures has not filtered down to all levels of society. Hence, greater awareness needs to be created among the citizens about the role the oceans can play in the nation's development and in the betterment of lives of ordinary people. Here I am mentioning ordinary people, mainly fishermen, depending on the ocean products, sea products. Let us not forget that the coastal areas are among those which are most affected by lack of health care, education, and high exposure to pollution, social ills, and exploitation. We should also take note of the fact that the majority of the people who end up in prisons of other countries, that's why I mentioned one example, due to lack of awareness about maritime laws, are our fisher folk. The model of sustainable development that evolves from our new initiatives should address all these issues. In today's context, the attempt by this conference to evaluate the way we manage our ocean economy is certainly laudable. I understand that the 3-day conference would discuss issues related to reduction of pollution, protection of fish stock, marine ecology, climate change, disaster management, and security management, etc. I greet all the delegates participating in this conference and hope that their suggestions would contribute to improving the ocean governance measures in our country. Thank you. Jai Hind.